Hi, welcome back. This is episode 2 of Fermented Files. And today we have 2 trigger warnings for you.
First, the quality of this recording is not great, but we are promising that we are gonna do so much better starting episode 3. And second,
in today's episode we'll be exploring, or at least mentioning, some scenes of physical and sexual abuse. So, listeners' discretionary is advised, I guess we should say?
yeah.
Anyway, enjoy. Just doesn't feel right. It just feels wrong.
This is how we're gonna start the podcast. The first words. It doesn't feel right.
Okay, so my story today is quite an interesting one because it's like a 2-act play almost. Because half of it is a ghost story and a haunting,
Yeah.
and the other one is actual true crime.
So basically you are spoiling the story now.
No, it's like that's the fun part. Like, you know what to expect, okay? And there's obviously like a thing in between to sort of connect them. But it's definitely one of my favorite sort of true crime / ghost stories. And it is an interesting one because there's just it's quite notorious, and there's movies made about it. And I guess it's because apart 3 key players in at least the first part of the story were children and teenagers. There's like very little facts that are actually known. It's mostly sort of speculation and sort of a lot of like urban legends around it. So it's definitely an interesting one to research. And I'm gonna try and do it justice. Okay, so we start our story in Massachusetts in 1986. It's not that long ago, really, compared to most of the iconic true crime stories. We start in 1986, and this is where we immediately run into the problem of what is fact and what is reality.
Okay.
Because wherever you read it, there's the central to the story are 2 daughters and their father, like a family living together. And I would say it's a 50-50 between different sort of sources, even when it comes down to their actual names. So I'm going to choose the one that I think is the correct one, because there's some more research on that one.
Yeah.
So we start with Tina and Karen, who are the daughters of a man that's either named Frank or Brian. I'm going to call him Frank for the purpose of this story.
Do we have other names for the daughters?
Yeah, so it's either Tina and Karen or Annie and... I don't remember the younger girl's alternative name.
Tina and Karen sounds better.
Yeah, so Tina and Karen. Tina is the older one, and I think she's around 15 in 1986. And Karen is her younger sister. Couldn't find exactly how old she was, but I understand she was sort of pre-teens, so significantly younger, I guess. So they live with their father, who I'm calling Frank, who's just became a single father because their mother, his wife, has sadly passed away from cancer quite recently. And as you do, because the girls are of, sensitive age, they're sort of dealing with their loss in their own kind of way. And one of those ways is they decide to use an Ouija board to communicate with their dead mother. So what they do, they pick up their Ouija board that they made themselves. We know all about this as post-Soviet kids.
We did that.
How many stories do you have about?
I don't have a lot of stories, but like I tried it twice, I think.
Yeah.
And
what happened?
I don't remember a lot, but how we did it, it was obviously self-made, but it wasn't like with a little glass thing. It was with a needle and a thread. Yeah. And basically you paid an eye, and you have all the letters and yes and no, I think, at the ends. And you basically invite the spirit or spirits, and you ask questions. And my cousin, she did that a few times alone, and she basically had ghost friend, I guess, or whatever. Okay. And he I think it was a he, as I remember, and I don't remember the questions, but I remember that we invited him, and the needle was moving, and yeah.
We should invite her to one of our podcasts to talk about her experience with her demon friend.
Yeah, and since we are international podcast, and she lives in Ireland, I think, so,
neighbors.
Yeah.
No, because, like, obviously we used to, I don't know if you did that as well, we used to put, obviously, a needle, a thread, and then to sort of, like, weigh down a ring, but, like, usually a gold ring, to act as, like, the actual pointer, because, you know, it's heavy. Yeah. So it can only go if it's actually being moved. Whatever.
Okay, we didn't do that. We just had the needle and...
Okay, well, you did the fake someday. Sorry to report this to you. No, but we obviously did it quite a few times. But one of the times, I remember we sort of, like, got, presumably, a demon in to, like, communicate with us.
Okay.
And I think, obviously I was quite small at the time, but what I do remember is we got scared. We sort of like crumbled the makeshift Ouija board, the paper one. And as we were crumbling it, me and my friend who were doing it, it got really, really hot. Like the way that paper cannot possibly get as hot from just like crumbling it. Because you're not spending 10 minutes doing it. I remember we were so scared, so then we sort of like ripped it apart, and I think we buried it in like a sandbox that was local to my grandma's house. But that was like a serious scary moment. And yeah, but I presume that we left the portal open, so if there's some weird things going on around my grandma's house, I do apologize. Anyway, so Tina and Karen made themselves an Ouija board. They gathered some of their mom's things that were obviously still in the house, and they headed down to the basement of their house to try and have a seance. Unfortunately, as soon as they started and sort of got in touch with the outer world, with the other side, their dad, who was obviously a pragmatic, older man, he caught wind of it, and he immediately sort of stopped them and asked them to, come upstairs and stop playing silly games and whatever. And then, being young, well-mannered, very elegant, very demure girls, that's what they did. They just went upstairs to presumably, I don't know, have dinner or something. What we do know from our experience with our own Ouija boards, right? Rule number 1, kids, is you do not leave a portal open. If you open it, you have to say goodbye, and you have to ask the spirits or the demons to sort of stay away and leave, and only then you close the portal, and only then you go to have your dinner with your father, Frank. So that's not something they did. They just left the portal open and went upstairs. And that's where we get into the fun stuff. Don't do this at home, obviously. If you do open a portal, don't forget to close it.
That's very important.
It is. Cautionary tale. So shortly after this failed, interrupted seance, strange things started happening in their house. At first, they started hearing sort of random bangs around the house. The peculiar thing about it is these bangs were coming from the walls, sort of the internal walls of the building. So, where you have 2 rooms next to each other and you have an internal wall. Not that someone's, just like near your window banging, but like actually between the rooms. So that was a bit creepy, but, they didn't think too much of it. And now we're going to go into a little bit of a sort of a romantic interlude of the story.
You love that. Every story needs something.
Exactly.
Like
we're just giving something to the girlies, to the romantics.
Yeah.
So one day, the bangings are still occurring, but sort of very sporadically. What happens is the older girl, Tina, receives a phone call to the house. And on the other side of the line, there's a young boy who introduces himself as Danny, who's 16 years old. And he tells Tina a story about having seen her in a local baseball game. And he tells her that he actually became so infatuated with her just by, casting a glance at her, that he went through all of his friends trying to get her phone number. And eventually he did. And that's why he's calling. Which was, very sweet, and probably, I think, as you said before, the same as sliding into one's DMs is these days. But, it's romantic, imagine.
But I mean, how much effort he put into that? Because Now you just go onto Instagram and like check the followers of your friends and just find the person, and then he had to like talk with their friends and get the number, and
The bar was high.
yeah.
The bar was high, and he nailed it. So they're chatting, and he's telling her how much he likes her and whatever. And during that conversation, somehow it happens that he tells her about himself in terms that, he's from a local school, not hers, but like the one, next to it, sort of in the same area. He's tall, blonde, athletic, well, essentially, an all-American football player or whatever. Dream. Hi.
Perfect boy.
And all this, and he clearly likes her because he went through all that trouble, right? So, just ideal. So Tina is obviously, flattered and whatnot, and when he asks her out on a date to go and have some ice cream, she's like, yes, absolutely, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes. Well, what happens is, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, there's always something that prevents Danny, the all-American sweetheart, from meeting Tina. So they keep communicating over the phone, and they build a rapport, and, they're having nice conversations, and it's essentially like a romance at this point.
Aww.
Which is very cute. Because they're also that, highs in like 15, 16-year-olds,
yeah.
So how exciting is that, right? What eventually happens is, after those 2 or 3 weeks, there's a knock on Tina's door, and Danny has showed up to take her on a date.
Aww.
Yay.
What can go wrong?
Well, let me tell you exactly what can go wrong. So, on the other side of the door, there is a young boy that looks around 16 or 17.
Okay.
There is
Good start.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that boy is the absolute opposite of what Danny described himself to be on the phone. The boy at the door is, yes, tall, but lanky, skinny, dark-haired, sort of spots on his face, hasn't clearly washed himself for days or weeks, greasy hair, no eye contact, just the absolute opposite of, the American football player. So Tina's like, okay, yeah, all right. But, he didn't lie about one thing. His name was Danny. So
okay,
that's good.
Okay.
We love a truthful man.
We don't love the case of catfishing, but we love a truthful man. And
well, it wasn't catfishing in 1986. There was no such thing. It was just lost in translation.
It was one of the first cases of catfishing.
Get MTV on the case. So it is Danny. Unfortunately, Danny is nothing like what he described himself to be, which I think is also a testament of how much he liked the girl. Because obviously, if you're catfishing someone and you still sort of consciously make that decision to go and show yourself as who you are, you have to have belief in that relationship working out, right?
And also a lot of confidence.
Yeah. I think that obviously not a fan of Danny Boy, but I think this was a ballsy move.
Yeah.
Danny came to the house. Danny believed in his rapport that he built with Tina, and he thought it was all going to be okay. So my true crime fans that might be familiar with the story could potentially already guess. So I think some of real true crime fans might already see where this is going from the first bit, and they might guess that this Danny boy is the main character of this story. And the guy we're talking about is actually Daniel LaPlante. I will refer to him as Danny Boy because that's what I like to do, but who he is Daniel LaPlante. So what Tina does, being a very well brought up, very demure 15-year-old, she feels sorry for Daniel, for Danny Boy.
Of course.
And she agrees to, just on that one occasion, to go on a date with him. And they go on that date. Again, sources differ. Some say they went to a fun fair, as you do, I guess, in America. The others say they just went to have some ice cream. But the point is, they did go on that date. And I guess to an extent, Danny already set himself a bar of some sort by lying about who he is, except for the name. But that was not it. During that date, he set himself another bar, which was way worse. Apparently, the only thing that he actually wanted to speak to Tina about was her mother's death. Some of my favorite questions of his included, were you there? And were you looking at your mother at the exact moment that she died? Did you see the light leaving her eyes as she died? And, stuff like that.
Yeah, casual first date
normal
questions.
Normal for us for a first date?
Yeah.
Back in 1986 to a 15-year-old, maybe? Without a true crime / conspiracy podcast, maybe not as normal.
But do we know that what she answered or not?
We do not know what she answered. What we do know is she was having none of it, and even though she was very polite, she was like, you know what, I'm a bounce. So she made up some sort of a excuse. She had a thing. She had to go.
yeah, happens all the time.
And so she loved that wonderful, not at all dramatic date. And they've actually pretty much never ever saw each other again. They never spoke on the phone. That was the end of the
That's it.
very brief, very one-sided love story.
So that's the end of our podcast.
That's the end. Sadly for you, it's not. So that's the end of that love story. And now we go back to the real story. So we go back to their house, Tina and Karen's house, where nothing's changed. They're still banging on the walls. It's sporadic. It comes from different parts of the house. Eventually girls, because again, I'll remind you, they're of that sensitive sort of preteen and teenage. They're dealing with their trauma of losing their mother. So what they eventually figure out what's happening is when they opened the portal where we started our story, their mom actually came to the house, and their mom was now in the house communicating with them through the walls. So what they did, they essentially used their whole house as the Ouija board. They started speaking to the house. They started asking questions about their mother, to the house.
Okay.
And the best part is, the house was answering. By way of, knocks. So one knock for yes, 2 knocks for no. Something like that. All good. However, 2-3 weeks, a couple weeks later, there was a new development. They were still banging in the walls, but small stuff started moving around. So, your everyday items. Like, I don't know, glasses that you put on the table, and then you find them in a different place. I don't know, a cup. A bit later, nothing thinks too much about it. Maybe it's just their mom trying to sort of establish that it's really her and sort of communicating with them as she gets stronger or whatever.
Basically just tidying up
after
the girls, yeah.
Exactly. And then again, a couple weeks later, it gets more intense because smaller pieces of furniture start moving. They leave the house, sofas one side of the room, they come back, sofas on the other side of the room.
Happens.
Not threatening as such at this point, but absolutely weird for a ghost woman of a woman to do that, but whatever.
But maybe she just wanted to decorate the house because...
Exactly. I mean, she's still there. Yeah. She continues to care for her family. The sort of the last straw is when things actually start disappearing. And girls at this point are a bit scared. They're like, this wouldn't be our mom. This is weird. Whereas their father, Frank, is just absolutely livid. Because he, being a pragmatic older man, he does not believe in this paranormal stuff. He does not believe in ghosts and spirits, whatever. He thinks his daughters are going through a hard time dealing with their trauma, and so they're acting out to get some attention. So he's absolutely livid. He's upset. But there's not much he can do. And I will give you a hint. It was not the girls who were moving the furniture.
Oh my God.
So what Frank did, seeing the way his daughters were acting out, he simply signed them up to go and see a psychiatrist, which is, that's going to sort them all out, especially the ghostly activity that they're not responsible for.
Yeah.
So he's hoping for the best. He's hoping everything's going to be okay. And let me tell you what, it doesn't get better, because one day, the banging from the walls actually moves down to the basement. Okay? And here are 2 girls, Tina and Karen, act as exactly as any horror movie main character would. They don't leave the house. They grab a knife out of the kitchen cupboard, and they bloody go down to that basement to check what's up, what's going on.
Watch and learn, kids. That's what you do.
I'm gonna let you guess what they find in the basement. Which is not gonna be hard because you already know the story. Because we do this in Lithuania.
I guess. I don't know what is happening in the basement, but I guess there's a message. Some sort of message.
Yes. There is indeed a message. there is a message on the wall written in red. So we can only presume it's blood because
Obviously.
this is, after all, a ghostly or demonic possession of some sort.
Yeah.
And what the message says is, I'm in your room, come and find me.
Okay.
This is giving, and for like non-Lithuanian listeners, this might not make sense, although I do try to sort of introduce the urban legends of Lithuania to all of my sort of non-Lithuanian friends. This is giving me the Black Hand story.
Yeah.
Which is quite popular in Lithuania, but we figured out that we both know very different versions of it. Essentially, this Black Hand is just some sort of a ghost in the form of a black hand that travels around and always finds you. And then it kills you. But then it always lets you know that it's coming for you. It just calls you on the phone and he's like, oh, I'm in your town now. And he calls you again a bit later and he's like, oh, I'm on your street now. And then again, oh, I'm just climbing up the stairs. And finally you get the final call where the Black Hand says, I'm behind you. And you put the phone down. And that's where the story ends because you die.
Yeah. But interesting thing for me. How do you imagine the Black Hand? Is it like only the hand? Like,
yeah.
Because I imagine like to the shoulder.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know why. But in my imagination, it is like the whole hand to the shoulder. But it's like it's in the air. It's not like, you know, it doesn't have little legs to go. It's like floating in the air. But it's not just like from Adam's family. It's like the whole hand.
That's so funny because mine is exactly the Addams Family one. It's just like pitch black, like, you know, when you have like a full-blown tattoo.
Yeah.
Like you just get a blackout tattoo and there's just like a little arm that travels on its fingers and it's just like super fast. That's why it can find you so quick.
Okay. So yeah, as you can see, we have different imaginations of the same story, but we discussed that we both know the story because it is like urban legend in Lithuania.
It is the story you tell around a fireplace or like a bonfire in summer camps and everyone's absolutely scared of it. Maybe I'll try and see if there's something in English to that extent and post it on Instagram as well because it's literally the scariest baby story that I knew growing up. I was just always so conscious about Black Hand existing. Just didn't want to upset it. There's that other one that my partner always tells me about the snail. It's more of a question. Apparently there's a thing, like an existential question. Would you be as you are now, you know, all your money, all your health, whatever, or would you choose being the richest person, the healthiest person, the most talented person, but you would always have a snail following you, and wherever you go, the snail's gonna find you.
Not the
eventually.
Yeah. I think it was like COVID times or something. The snail was all over the TikTok.
Really?
Yeah,
I've never seen it.
I wasn't. I saw a video quite recently, like a few months ago, about the snail as a reminder that the snail is somewhere and it's getting to you. It is getting to you, but yeah, I saw a lot of TikToks and it was obviously a few years ago. I'm not sure it was COVID times or not, but not, you don't have to be like super rich and healthy. The snail is there.
Oh, it's just there.
It is getting
for
to
no
you.
reason.
Yeah, it is just getting to you and it's gonna kill you.
Well, you see, that's how urban legends are born. Because to me, it was like a question. You can choose one or the other.
Yeah.
But I've absolutely never heard of a snail before.
My snail is somewhere and it's coming to me.
I will have words with William about this. Okay. So what the girls found was that message on the wall. And at this point, they're like, okay, maybe let's not get braver than this. Let's leave the house. They leave the house and they're sort of at their neighbor's house, waiting for their dad to come back home. You will be absolutely shocked to find out that dad was livid when he came back home because in his mind, they're still just acting out. There's nothing untoward going on. This is too much. You know, them moving stuff, fine. Excessive, but fine. But writing on the walls with blood or something red. That's just, you know, have some respect, guys. So
if you need attention, just like save something. You don't have to like go all the way.
Yeah. So he's livid. But on the bright side, after this incident with the writing on the wall, and no, I will not break out into a song.
That's sad. Not even battle song?
I'm just so talented. I just can't not sing, but I will try for you guys because you don't deserve it. That's for 47th level of our Patreon. subscriber.
Or you can subscribe to OnlyFans of Rugilė and her.
Oh, yeah, true.
And hear the singing.
Yeah, don't forget my OnlyFans, guys. I'll drop the link in the comments description. So after the last incident with the writing on the wall, everything goes down a little bit, so it gets a bit more quiet. Everything's better for a couple of weeks, and the girls are like, oh, maybe, that's what the ghost wanted to do, just get the message out and sort of leave. Which, given the tone of that last message, unlikely, but, they're small children. And Dad's like, oh, great. Frank's happy because therapy is clearly working. The girls are no longer moving stuff. Everything's great. Unfortunately, that is not the end. After a couple of weeks, the banging on the walls is back. And it's much, much stronger than it was before. And at one point, it starts coming not from the walls, but from Tina's room. That's the older sister. Guess what the girls do? Have they learned the lesson? Are they going to go and wait at the neighbor's house? Or are they going to go up to Tina's room to check out?
They're going to take the knife and go to the room.
Yeah. So they went up to Tina's room. And guess what?
Another message.
Yes, another message.
Okay.
In red on the wall. And what it says is, I am back. If you're brave enough, come and find me.
So, can we speak about the messages a little bit?
Yeah.
It's not giving any specific stuff. It's just, oh, come find me. Where? Where do I find you?
Yeah, but I guess that's the point of the demonic possession. They are very rarely sort of extremely straightforward. They do choose someone to possess.
Yeah, but they kind of want you to go to like lead you somewhere where they can be like the strongest, I guess.
Yeah.
There's like no crosses on the wall or whatever.
Well, I'm sure there's different levels. There's junior demons, there's senior demons, and some of them are just learning their way.
And just mid-demons.
Maybe it was a learner demon.
Yeah.
Like a trainee.
Fair.
Okay, so this message actually scares the girls because clearly whatever was in the house has left for a small period of time and now it's back. So they do the right thing. They grab their stuff and they go back to the neighbor's house. They wait for their dad, Frank, to come home from work, and they're obviously expecting him to be angry, which he is. He doesn't waste no time. He goes back in the house, and what he finds in the house is the TV in the living room, sort of turned up to full volume, not the kind of volume that any person alive would enjoy listening to TV on.
Okay.
Just super loud, super annoying. It's on, but it doesn't mean anything. Maybe the girls did it before they left, whatever. Maybe someone sat on a remote. He turns off the TV and he proceeds to go up to Tina's room where he knows that the last disturbance occurred. Once he enters Tina's room, there's not one but two surprises waiting for him. Okay? First is a second message that the girls have not seen.
Not another message.
Another message on the walls, and the message says, marry me. The ghost is asking someone to marry him. Her. They, them.
That's
cancelable.
That's weird.
It is very sweet. What's not so sweet is Frank, as he turns his eyes away from the message, he sees a strange figure in the same room, sort of near the back of the room, near the cupboards. And that is a male figure dressed in Frank's dead wife's wedding dress, with a blonde wig and a bunch of makeup on his face.
Oh my god.
Frank is obviously disturbed. He's about to confront that person. He's about to fight them. But what happens next is the figure simply disappears.
Just to defend here?
I mean, it's a ghost.
Okay.
Just disappears, okay? But Frank obviously doesn't believe in ghosts. So he goes down, he calls the police. Police arrive. And they just presume that whoever it was, and no one thinks it's a ghost except for the two girls, they're like, well, it must be still in the house because, the neighbors are outside. The girls are outside. They were waiting for Frank to check out the house. And surely someone would have seen a man in a big wedding dress and a blonde wig, running away. But they didn't. So they presume that whoever that was, whether a ghost or a human, is still in the house. So do a search. And eventually, after sort of looking at the house, doing, their investigative police work as they do, they figured out two things. The first thing was that the messages in blood on the walls were actually written in ketchup. So
oh my God.
No humans were harmed in making of the messages. And the other thing they find is that there were actually a bunch of crawl spaces all over the house. And someone, I'm going to tell you in a minute who that someone is.
Who could be the...
I know. I know. You're gonna have your mind blown in a second.
Of course.
So whoever the ghost was, they actually lived in the house. They used the crawl spaces to travel around the house. Some go as far as to say that they actually made pathways in all of the walls so they could travel inside the house and, do their little banging on the walls, communicating with the girls. And you will not guess who that person was.
I could never.
It definitely was not Daniel LaPlante, the
of
failed date.
No.
Yeah, that was him. So, this concludes our first part of the story. Only, I do have to confess something to you.
There's more?
Oh, you know there's more. There's
No,
the
I
whole
don't know.
second part. No, but what I do have to confess to you is everything that I've told you up to this point about Daniel LaPlante and Tina and Frank and Karen is all just an urban legend. That is how we want the story to go. That is how we heard the story to go. That is the story that was depicted in movies and shows about this case. The sad reality of it is what we truly know happened is on the 8th of December, 1986, Tina, Karen, their dad, Frank, and I think a friend of the girls friend, came back home and they found that someone had used their toilet while they were away.
Not the toilet.
Not the toilet. I don't know the particulars, the specifics, but I do know that that's the actual confirmed story.
Yeah.
They found that someone had been using their toilet. And what happened next is Daniel LaPlante came out of the cupboard under the stairs, Harry Potter coated, wearing some face paint, wearing, I think, a mask, and with a hatchet in one hand and a metal pole in the other hand. And he somehow managed to get all four of them into one of the bedrooms in the house, log them up, run away. Presumably, I understand he just ran back to the cupboards, like back to the walls of the house. Luckily, Tina managed to escape that sort of the shackles and whatever. And she went through the window to the neighbor's house. The neighbors called the police. Police arrived. They found everyone sort of, bound in the bedroom. And eventually they were able to confirm that, yes, someone has indeed been living in the walls of the house. And what actually happened is that Daniel did see Tina at some point in a game or whatever in school. And he fell in love with her and he became obsessed with her. So he somehow managed to get into the house, to get into the cupboards, into the crawl spaces, make some peepholes to sort of like observe her through. And he was just having the best time, He was just obsessed with her. He was just in love with her. Again, not to romanticize this, but if any man did this much for me, I would be flattered.
Same.
But the police didn't initially find him in the house after this happened. Obviously, Frank and the daughters kind of left the house on the same day because, a bit creepy and whatever. They probably went to a motel or something. 2 days later, Frank came back to the house to pick up some more stuff. And what he saw was Daniel in the window, sort of upstairs window. Frank called the police again. Police came, and this time they were able to arrest Daniel. He got a slew of charges, really. I think it was intention to cause bodily harm, it was destruction of property, it was kidnapping, I think 3 or 4 more. But because he was a juvenile, he was waiting for trial and whatnot. But he was a juvenile, it wasn't too heavy or anything. And eventually, I think just over a month later, while still waiting for trial, at least that's how the story goes, his mom remortgaged her house and she posted his bail of $10,000 and he just came back to live in the area.
We love America with just paying the bail and you can be a free man.
I mean, Britain also has bail. It's not like exclusively an American thing.
Oh, okay.
But I guess, because...
I think we kind of have it in Lithuania too.
Probably. And in this case, I guess it makes sense because, all he did was... it was very cruel, but he didn't really harm anyone. The part where he bound them, I don't really know why, but that is the only confirmed part about the story, really. So his bail was posted, and he left the juvie, and he went to live with his mommy and his stepdad. So that's where we conclude the first part of the story. And
there's more?
Sadly for you, yes. I'll wrap the other one quickly. Cause
No, don't.
I think this one might be much longer than... Yeah, this is already much longer than the Lithuanian one. Because I think we had more banter in between as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so just because now that the ghost part is done and we know that the ghost was actually a human, Danny, I couldn't tell you much about him before, but I will just do like a small bit of an explanation, sort of profiling, and tell you about the Danny boy. So Danny... And I know this is a sad part for both of us because we've already done this in Lithuanian, and you're about to hear some awful things that happened to this guy. So from very young age, I think he didn't have the greatest family life, and you can guess that by the fact that he was literally living in someone's walls for about 3-4 months, and his actual parents did not miss him at all. So apart from that, he was diagnosed as ADHD, he was diagnosed as dyslexic, which I guess back in the day was not great now in terms of like perception, but back in the day was probably even worse. So he didn't have any friends, he was always like a bit weird, a loner, he didn't have the greatest personal hygiene, things like that. And sadly, from very young age, allegedly, he's been sexually abused by his dad and at least... I think dad's friend or whatever, or maybe another acquaintance, but another sort of grown-up person. So that's quite sad, okay? And he's naturally been acting out in school, and he wasn't the best student, or probably one of the worst students. So eventually, because of the disturbances he's been causing at school, he got assigned a psychologist. And this is the part where maybe we'll get better. And Carlos is already having a stroke because he knows what is to follow.
I forgot.
Oh, you remember?
I honestly forgot. And then you mentioned psychologist. Yeah. And I was like, not a psychologist.
Yeah, so Danny Boy gets assigned a psychologist. Probably at this point, because, early teens. His only chance to be a normal person after all the abuse he's experienced. And instead of... Well, I mean, the psychologist does diagnose him with ADHD, so I guess that's, job well done. But the other thing the psychologist does is also sexually abuse Danny.
Fuck.
And at this stage, he's like a young teenager. So that's like, I think the final stroke of the brush in the painting that is Daniel.
He's so unlucky.
Yeah, just I think you said that before. Every car that could have sort of fallen wrong for him did. It's truly tragic. I mean, obviously you won't condone what he does next or what he did before with the haunting, but it's a bit sad.
But I mean, the psychologist, it's so sad.
I know, but what can you do? So that's enough about Danny. Honestly, probably nothing else to say after that last fact. He's done. He's done for.
He is done.
And so we move into the very brief and quite frankly for me less exciting part of the story. And that's the true crime part of the story. So when Danny comes back from his juvie because his mom posted the bail, that's early 1987. Okay? So 3-4 months after the haunting in the next town over, because obviously he's still in Massachusetts, but he's, I think, in a different small town. So what Danny does as a hobby now, he starts robbing people. He just goes into everyone's houses and he steals everything from, food, jewelry, tech, whatever. Well, as far as tech went in 1986. So that's his new hobby. At one point, he even gets his hands on some guns. I think .22, whatever that means. That's obviously, I'm not a shooter. I don't know, but that's what the story says. I can Google what the .22 is. Well, apparently it's a long rifle. So that's actually quite helpful. It's a long rifle, which is pretty lethal, I imagine. So anyway, he just goes around the town stealing stuff, and I'm pretty sure that police is quite aware of it. And he gets sort of picked up a couple of times here and there and whatnot, but, he's a juvie, doesn't do that much harm, it's fine. And then almost exactly a year after the initial kidnapping kidnapping in quotes, of Tina and Karen and whatever, Frank. Almost a year after, on the 1st of December, Danny goes into the house that he's actually previously robbed, which is the house where he got the guns in the first place. And I'm pretty sure he just came back to look for more stuff because his initial haul was quite good. Unfortunately for him, and especially for the victims, just as he's leaving the house, the woman of the house and her son, a 5-year-old son, William, Miss Gustafson, comes back and she sort of catches him in the act. So that's not ideal.
It is not.
So what he does, he grabs William, the 5-year-old boy, puts him in the closet. He grabs Priscilla Gustafson, the wife of a local lawyer that's also pregnant with her 3rd child, just, as a side note. He puts a sock, and we know about his hygiene, so probably not ideal. Puts a sock in her mouth, rapes her, and then shoots her twice in the head through a pillow with a .22 rifle. Then what he does is obviously he's not gonna, leave any loose ends. And that's you can't see funny part, but during the investigation, sort of like when they were searching the house later, the police actually found out that while he was doing all of this, forensic evidence shows that Danny Boy just had a beer, looked at some porn magazines. He was in no rush. He was like, let's make a day out of it. So at some point, after raping and killing the mother of Priscilla, goes on to William in the closet. He grabs William. He takes William to the bathroom. And again, this is a 5-year-old child. And he drowns him in that bathtub.
Fuck.
And then Danny's like, okay, I'm done. Let's go. Let's bounce. Unfortunately, just as he's leaving, the second child of Priscilla, which is a 7-year-old Abigail, comes back home from school. So naturally, she runs into Danny. And what Danny does is grabs her as well, puts her in another bathroom, drowns her as well, and then he leaves. So he's just killed 3 people. Obviously, their father, the local lawyer, comes back home and he's like, oh, yeah. So the story goes that police kind of immediately, knew that it was Danny. I guess because of the burglaries and potentially the forensic evidence, the beer and whatnot. So they're looking for him. Again, 2-day rule with Danny. They cannot find him for 2 days. 2 days later, they accidentally sort of stumble upon him. He sets off running. They're like, okay, we'll arrest him. They arrest him. All good. He gets charged with 3 murders. Gets 3 consecutive life sentences. And that's his story. He's still quite young. That's the weird part to me because it's such an iconic story. But he's 53 years old or 54 years old or whatever. In his early 50s. So he's still quite young. In prison for 3 life sentences. And I think that there was this thing where the law in Massachusetts changed recently where because he was a juvenile, and for any juvenile that got life sentences, they were supposed to be retrialed to get a retrial. And he obviously got this whole really sad speech about, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I robbed 3 people of their lives. I robbed the 4th baby. Of his first breath, whatever. But the psychologist, the court psychologist was like, no, he's actually full of shit. He absolutely feels no remorse. So he's back to being in jail for life. And that is his story. Not to say that he ever had a chance to not be an absolute creep and a psycho. But, I love it. As I said, it has both of my favorite aspects. And yes, there is a Lifetime, sadly it's a Lifetime movie, about the story, the first part of it. It's called The Boy Who Lived in the Walls, if I'm not mistaken. There's a couple of true crime shows that have episodes with them, but I think Lifetime movie is the main one. So yeah, that's it. I do apologize. It took me over an hour to go through it.
No, I think after editing it will be less than an hour.
Yeah, but you've had to listen to it twice now in 2 languages.
No, but since I have bad memory, I forgot a lot of stuff, and even the second time I was like, you mentioned psychologist, and I was like, oh my God, I forgot about this part. I think it was trauma response, and I was like, I don't want to remember this, so I forgot about it. And then you were like, oh, there's psychologist, and I was like, not a psychologist again. But what is good that we have one good psychologist in the story that's said the end that he is full of shit he should stay in prison and he shouldn't get a retrial because, of course, he shouldn't. We do get some sympathy, I guess, for him when, for his childhood, but But at the end of the day, he did the murders, and that's where he crossed the line.
Yeah. Well, you also obviously, I think we spoke about this before, there was, I guess, a torture element to the whole ghost bit, where clearly he just went in there to spy on Tina, but then maybe started torturing her a bit, like making her feel like, she was communicating with her dead mother and whatnot. But this story is very, interesting to me, and I think maybe in the future I will do whatever form an episode on nurture versus nature, because that's, one of my most interesting. I just absolutely love that shit. Yeah. I still have not made my mind up on where we are in terms of that.
That would be interesting.
It's shifts. Yeah. But that is just absolutely, could Danny have not done this if it was nature rather than nurture?
Yeah.
Was he a psychopath, or was he nurtured to be, a sociopath, whatever? So that's definitely interesting. Maybe we'll touch upon it in the future.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, Danny boy is, one of my faves, and I hope it wasn't too long, and I hope you enjoyed it enough. So that's us for the day, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the story.
Not as exciting as birds or cats.
Thank you for listening, and thanks, Drew, for an amazing episode.
We'll see you again in 3 weeks.